A company's threat intelligence team detects DNS tunneling activity from an internal workstation, the workstation generating an unusual high number of outbound DNS requests to random subdomains. What is the most effective immediate action? A, blacklist the suspicious domain and block it at the firewall. B, shut down the workstation immediately. C, flush the DNS cache on the workstation. D, isolate the workstation and analyze the DNS traffic patterns. So let's see what you got. D, isolate the workstation and analyze the DNS traffic patterns is the answer. So DNS tunneling is pretty simple. So it pretty much is a like a secret sneaky attack that allows malware to exfiltrate data through DNS service requests, right? So your domain name server, right? If we didn't know that, that was going to make this a whole hell of a lot harder, right? So it basically just blocks a domain and, blocking the domain is not going to stop this, right? It would make sense. You would think, okay, well, all I got to do is turn off the DNS server or point it to a different DNS server, and that's not going to stop the attack. So new domains can be generated dynamically. So that's the scary part, right? So with DNS tunneling, it can actually, create on its own other domains. So you just got to be careful. So full packet analysis is needed to determine the attack scope. So you may think it's just on one domain, but it's on several domains, right? So through DNS tunneling, it's kind of scary because if you don't know what's going on, it could be doing all kind of stuff and you have no idea, right? And that's most attacks now. A lot of times you won't know you're being attacked until, unfortunately, it's too late. All right, next up. A penetration tester is conducting an internal assessment and successfully performs an LLMNR/NBT-NS spoofing attack. The tester is able to capture and relay NTLM version 2 authentication hashes, but cannot execute commands on the victim machine. What is the most likely reason? A, the target system has SMB signing in force. B, the captured hashes are incomplete. C, the penetration tester is using the wrong relay protocol. D, the network does not support NTLM authentication. The target system has SMB signing in force. So SMB signing ensures that LTMM authentication traffic is cryptographically verified, preventing relay attacks. So relay attacks basically mean that you capture the information and then you relay it either immediately at a later time. If enabled, even a successful hash capture cannot be used to execute commands remotely. All right, now this one is from Advanced Penetration Testing and Red Teaming. During a red team engagement, you gain low privilege access to a Windows endpoint. The endpoint is configured with Windows Defender and logging is enabled. You need to escalate privileges without triggering security alerts. Which technique would be the most stealthy? A, exploit a vulnerable kernel driver. B, modify group policy to disable Defender. C, use token impersonation to escalate to system. D, create a malicious PowerShell script and execute it with administrative privileges. What you guys think about this in the comments? Let me know. Are you a red team or blue team? What are we looking for? Are we red team or blue team or a mixture of both? You ready? Hopefully that was enough time for you. So for this, basically you would use token impersonation to escalate to system. So think of a token impersonation pretty much as incognito mode. It allows an attacker to leverage an already existing privilege token to escalate privileges without modifying system settings or executing new processes that could trigger AV alerts, AV antivirus alerts, right? So we got a couple more questions to get into. As you can see, these last couple of questions have had a increase in difficulty on purpose. So I would say that on the actual exam, a lot of the questions are going to be, I guess you could say, convoluted in a sense, meaning there's going to be a lot of extra information in there that you don't necessarily need, but they do that on purpose just to increase the difficulty of the exam and also make sure that you can, decipher information and get what you need out of it. All right. This is from Cloud Security and Enterprise Security Architecture. A company has deployed a multi-cloud environment across AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. The security team detects privilege escalation attempts when an attacker is switching between accounts using OAuth tokens. What is the best way to mitigate this risk? A, enforce strict IAM rules or IAM rules, roles, and limit OAuth token scope. B, disable multi-cloud integration and use only one provider. C, require all API keys to be rotated every 24 hours. D, use an intrusion detection system or IDS on the cloud edge. You ready? Here we go. So hopefully you got this answer correct. So enforce a strict IAM rules and limit OAuth token scope. Attackers abuse OAuth tokens to gain lateral movement between cloud accounts, restricting token privileges and implementing zero trust. We talked about that earlier. IAM policies prevents unauthorized privilege escalation. So do you see how this question and answer kind of piggybacked off of some of the other stuff that we talked about earlier? So if you're actually in the exam room, whether you're taking this or another certification, most times I would suggest that you just skip it. Let's say that you get to a question, you have no idea what the hell it's talking about, skip it and then go to the next question. And then eventually something like this is going to pop up and it may spark something that was previously talked about. Like, oh, okay, now that they said or formed the question in this way, now I understand what that previous question was talking about. Because remember, in the actual exam, we do not have that much time. We do not have that much time. We do not have that much time. So if you look at a question, you read it, you go through the answers, you read it again, you go through the answer, you still have no idea what the hell it's talking about, just go to the next question, right? Because eventually you'll go to a question, you'll know exactly what it's talking about. You'll feel really good about the answer. That'll boost your confidence, and then you can go back and answer the questions that you skip. All right, so a government agency, what is this from? This is from Cyber Warfare and Nation State Threat Actors. A government agency reports that its critical infrastructure control systems have been targeted by a Stuxnet-like attack. The malware appears to be executing PLC commands remotely. What defense strategy should be implemented immediately? A, implement network segmentation and air gap critical systems. B, apply endpoint detection and response EDR to PLC controllers. C, force all devices to undergo a firmware rollback. D, block all external IP addresses from accessing industrial control systems. All right. Hopefully you guys answered. Implement network segmentation and air gap critical systems. So that type of style attack targets industrial control systems and SCADA networks. Air gap and critical infrastructure prevents remote exploitation of PLCs by isolating them from internet connected networks. So the easiest way to secure anything is never connected to the internet. So when you air gap something, it's just a system that doesn't have an internet or just a device that's not connected to the internet. A global corporation is moving toward a zero trust model. They want to enforce continuous authentication and real-time risk-based access policies. Which security framework should they adopt? A, NIST 800-207, B, ISO 27001, C, CIS controls B8, D, MIT RE attack. All right, you ready? Here we go. At NIST 800-207. So for that, it pretty much defines the zero trust architecture, which enforces continuous authentication, which we talked about earlier, identity verification, and strict access policies. So I gave you guys more than I thought. I thought it was only 15 questions, but I guess it's more than that. But hey, more is less, or less is more, whatever the hell. Anyway, you're welcome. A SOC operations center analyst notices that multiple internal devices are sending random size encrypted packets to a known threat actor controlled IP address. What type of attack is most likely occurring? A C2 command and control beaconing, B, a DNS amplification attack, C, man in the middle attack, D, SQL injection attack. Five, four, three, two, one. You ready? Here we go. So for this, it's something we already talked about earlier, command and control beaconing. So C2 beaconing occurs when compromised hosts communicate with external attack control servers, often using encrypted packets to evade detection. This is from Advanced Cryptography and Data Protection. A security engineer is implementing post-quantum cryptography to protect against future threats from quantum computing. Which encryption algorithm should be avoided due to quantum vulnerability? RSA 2048, AES 256, SHA-3, ECC. All right. So the answer for this is RSA 2048. Quantum computers can break that level of encryption using Shor's algorithm, pretty much rendering that and any other asymmetric encryption algorithm kind of obsolete and really insecure in the future. This is from Ransomware and Cybercrime Defense. A healthcare provider experiences a ransom attack where critical patient data has been encrypted. The attacker demands Bitcoin in exchange for the decryption key. The organization has daily backups, but fears that restoring data might reinfect the network. What is the best approach? A, perform a forensic analysis before restoring from backup. Pay the ransom to recover patient data quickly. Use an endpoint rollback feature to revert changes. Or D, delete all encrypted files and rebuild the network. All right, so what do you think? Here we go. So perform a forensic analysis before restoring from backup. So a ransomware often includes backdoors, meaning that if you just act like everything is cool, the attacker, whoever the malicious actor will still have access via a line of code or just something that when they infected the system, they'll still have access to the system because it's pretty much how the attack was formulated, how it was thought up, so on and so forth. And restoring backups without analyzing everything could just simply reinfect the backups too. And now you paid them. I'm not saying that that's what people do, but let's say that you paid them the ransom. They kind of helped you out a little bit, unlocked some stuff, and it's okay. Let me just run it one more time to make sure it's not on here. Or you don't do that, and then you put the backups on there, and then boom, they get you again, and now they asking for more Bitcoin, right? All right, gang, it was awesome hanging out with you. So at a minimum, right, is let's say that you're not ready for access to the practice test vaults or access to the ITF course or want to become a Zero to IT Pro or Zero to IT Hero. You can go through hundreds of videos on this channel for A+, Net+, Security+, cloud stuff, AWS. We have training for everything you can think of. Hopefully this was worth your time. If it was, like and then comment below and tell me what you're looking for, like what video you're looking forward to me dropping next. Other than that, I will see you in class.